Well, here we are, Alan, after so many years, since 1957, over 50 years. You're back here in Palomar Gardens, or Oak Knoll as it's known now, the residence with George Adamski and all his students, and where many of the famous UFO pictures were taken via telescope and motion picture footage as well. And not much has changed as far as the valley here in front of us. There's still the main road that goes up to Mount Palomar and the Hale Observatory.
Right.
And the entrance to the facility here comes right off the road, just as it did then.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the archival shots that we'll look at later show the facilities, how it's changed over the years. As we move up the driveway a little bit and we take a look here towards this building, the building here is new, but right here below it is the cement slab where the original
take a look at that.
cafe was located. The cafe was established by Alice Wells, one of George Adamski's students, as a means of subsidizing the property and all the expenses involved, other than the philosophical school that they ran here with many of their students that had migrated with them from Laguna Beach to Valley Center right across the ridge, and then here, and eventually next door on the property as well. And
where we're standing was the part of the parking area that went with the cafe. And when my UFO came down by the 15-inch dome, 4 people came out of the cafe and they were looking directly at the dome and the UFO.
So there was quite a commotion.
So it was quite a commotion. They were screaming, "There's a UFO on the ground." They wouldn't stop. And one of the gentlemen ran from the parking lot through the trees where I was using George's 6-inch scope.
Right.
And he almost knocked me down. He said, "There's a UFO on the ground." I said, "Yes, I know, and if you'll get out of my way, I'm going over to say hello to these
That's
people."
right.
So he vanished, and the UFO increased in the soft hum that it was making to a higher frequency. And then the intensity of the brightness around the corona got very bright, and it began to get very, very bright, intensely bright.
Pulsating?
It didn't pulsate as much as it seemed to grow in intensity and shimmer.
Right.
You could see it shimmer. It was very intense. It was almost like looking at water over a chrome hubcap, and rose straight up, no sound, and stopped when it was about the size of the stars in the star field I was looking at, and then disappeared toward San Diego. And I was pretty excited about the whole thing. All right, after the UFO rose and headed towards San Diego,
About the reaction of the other people on the property. I mean, obviously
they
there
were
so many
they were
witnesses.
still yelling, "We've seen a UFO. There's a UFO on the ground. It's gone." They were still made a lot of noise. So I went in to talk to George to tell him what had happened. And he was in there talking with a friend. And I told George what happened. And he just looked at me and smiled, drumming his fingers on the table like he usually does. And he said, "Well, I was just wondering what all the ruckus was out there." So he was an early contactee and he knew pretty much what had happened. But for me, that was my encounter with the UFO right there.
Now that we've walked past the facility where the old building stood, we're looking more up here, where the property extended itself. And as we look here, of course, this asphalt road didn't exist. It was more of a dirt paved road.
Dirt paved, right.
That's right. And George had put his larger telescope, the 15-inch telescope, up there closer to that field where the UFO touched down.
Right.
And put the observatory there next to that, which we can see later in archival pictures. So as we look at these trees here, we could say safely that's probably about 100 feet or less. And the picture of that one saucer that came over the property, you can see the top of the trees. So in actuality, this craft could not have been more than 10, 30, 40 feet off the ground to be able to get the whole tree into the same viewfinder. And so when they dropped that package that contained that emulsion plate that George had given that extraterrestrial visitor 3 weeks prior, they opened it up, and inside was a series of petroglyphs and engravings and carvings that depict the system to the electromagnetic, electrostatic free energy propulsion system. And interestingly enough, they coincide with symbols that were found in the Brazilian jungle by Professor Marcel Homé, and he published them in his book, The Sons of the Sun. And it was located in an area called the Piedra Pintada, the Painted Rock, in which the dating of these particular carvings were more than 10,000 years old.
Wow.
So it's safe to say that this type of technology and this type of interaction between people of this planet and other planets have been going on for a long time. Well, why don't we continue to walk up the property here and take a look at the areas that you recall from 1957 and the many times you visited George, the dynamic sighting you had, and the location of the observatory.
Okay.
Well, as we have walked up the hill a little bit here and we look back down towards the base of the entrance of the property where the cafe used to stand, you mentioned that when that ship came down and touched down behind us, which we will point to momentarily, the people came running out of the cafe exclaiming, "There's a UFO on the ground, a UFO," and came running up the hill. And you were over here off to the side with the trees where George's bungalow was, amongst the many bungalows, and so you had a 90-degree look at it. As we turn around and take a look here, these trees, the smaller ones right next to us and the ones right in here, didn't exist. So there was a much more clear field of vision coming up this hill. With the 15-inch observatory sitting right here off to the side, this whole hill here, this area, this flat area, was this open space that you were referring to, and it's clear of trees too, as the saucer came down and just hovered slightly above the ground, leaving the charred remains, the circular 35-foot diameter charred remains that you mentioned.
I was, of course, at George's patio area where the 6-inch scope was.
Right.
Looking at the dome. I'd be looking in this direction.
Right.
And when it ascended to altitude, where it was about the size of the stars, it stopped momentarily.
Right.
And then it shot in that direction.
Due west.
Yep, due west.
And what about the other people that had come up the hill, and how did that, did you see the
They
witness?
were still talking about
Still
it.
talking
Still
about it.
talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you see that?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. And but I'll tell you, I wasn't afraid.
No.
And felt very good about it.
Mm-hmm. The fact that you mentioned that you didn't feel any fear or apprehension, nothing but a great wonderment and sympathy to the occurrence, is a concept that is indicative from the 1950s. In fact, historically, all the way through biblical times, no matter where we have gone historical record all over the globe, there has always been contact of benevolence, of progress, and friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed dramatically once we got into the mid-1960s, and I believe so for very specific reasons, not entirely having to do with anything that visits us or anyone that visits us extraterrestrially, but more of an internal compartmentalization that we have instigated in order to keep people imbalanced when it comes to this subject.
Prevent the information from leaking out and becoming public knowledge.
And grabbing
so
too much hold. I mean, we
right.
went into a space program under President Kennedy that had such emphasis to get us into space for several reasons. One, we needed to learn about this planet and geophysically how it operates, and that was a key message the space visitors gave George Adamski. We needed to unite our workforce and our economic development out of a military industrialist kind of situation and a petroleum fuel situation more towards a unified into space free energy concept, which we could employ millions of people and we wouldn't suffer the type of difficulties we do today.
That's right.
And lastly, it was our rightful heritage, our rightful place to expand our knowledge and to verify and confirm within ourselves that we are not alone, never have been,
Never have been.
and that intelligence is spread throughout the cosmos, and we should be part of it rather than trying to hide it or get away from it.
Well, humans throughout the universe are the norm rather than the exception.
Exactly, and
I
we
think
have
that's
seen
what
that.
our astronauts will find out.
Well, that's what, remember, Gordon Cooper reported that he had interactions with humans from other planets.
Yes.
And also we have Edgar Mitchell and Brian O'Leary. So while we have some of our astronauts who have come forward and talked, not everyone has, and we have to understand the reasons why behind that. So rather than judge, we should be happy for the information that we did receive. Standing here, Alan, and we're looking at the spot where you had your UFO sighting, or one of dozens, literally, but this one here close to the ground. I think it's important that we recognize that there is no one particular spot that is more blessed, they would say, or more holy, or more attractive as a landing spot than any other. And George stressed this all the time. These extraterrestrial craft came to the location where the people were that they wanted to specifically impress. In this particular case, it happened to be here. But he was very, very vehement to tell people that it is not necessary to make pilgrimages to one place, because there is no one place, in their view, less holy or less worthy than any other.
Right.
As we round the corner here, Alan, and we look between the trees, which has been developed now into a campground area, on the far side over there is where the bungalows were built for the permanent residents here on the property. As you remember, Alice Wells, Martha Ulrich, Lucy McGinnis,
Right.
George and his wife Mary, who passed away in the mid-50s from cancer, and several other people who were involved with the development and staying here on the property. And they worked unilaterally, for lack of a better word, communally, in order to get the chores done. Some did some gardening, some other one did some cleaning up. It was basically what you would do at home with your own family.
Right, shared
And
work.
so everyone shared in the shores, and everybody developed little paths and made nature walks through the property. And it became a very lovely area here at the base of the mountain. And
It was a very pretty area.
very pretty, very serene area. And George was very happy to be here, and so were all the people who visited it, and especially the students who came here and spent some time with him. By that building, they came across the remnants of the building and the septic system,
Right.
and then up through this area and through here,
Mhm.
and then over here towards the field area and the observatory.
Right.
So I mean, 60 years is quite a bit of time when you think about how much everything has grown
Right.
and filled in, but it's still, I would say, 50% as much as what it used to. So
Just levitate them a little bit,
just a touch.
just a touch.
Yeah,
And if you have the technology, you might as well use it.
absolutely. As we look down here, we're standing pretty much right in the general area where this scout ship or this bell-shaped saucer touched down. It's changed a little bit here over the years due to construction, but as you look down the mountain, you get a straight shot right to where the old cafe was. And in reverse, as they looked up here, this is the area where it had settled down into. And as you mentioned, a foot or so off the ground, because as we
Yes,
talked earlier,
the witnesses were saying there's a UFO on the ground.
on the ground. From
So
this distance, it would
from
look
there, where they were, it appeared to be on the ground.
right.
And I thought it was a little bit off the ground.
Right. Well, as we know in reality, as we talked about earlier and how George described, the craft never touches the ground physically itself. That even with the propulsion system, what we would consider to be turned off, there's still a trickle charge, resultant energy that runs through there that keeps this craft always a certain distance off the ground. And then when you mentioned the charring area, or the swirling of the grass, and it's a charring, is the result of the magnetic belts that are underneath the flange that start to spin gyros in opposite directions, and then that scorches the area as it gains more power and altitude. So this is the general vicinity right here. A nice straight
is
shot
it.
up into the heavens as well as you
Right,
depart this area.
straight up, yep. uh,